guys, last time we talked about some bizarre Japan-exclusive games for the PS1, and the response was overwhelmingly positive, and it got me thinking, what about the PlayStation 2? I mean, it was and still is the best-selling console of all time, and many of the best games ever made were released here, not to mention the fact that it also had over 4,000 titles. Surely there must be some hidden gems in here that never got a Western release. So today, let's take a look at some of the weirdest games for the PlayStation 2. The first game we're going to be checking out is called
Boku wa Chiisai,
which means I'm small. It's a 3D platformer where you play as Palm, a member of the Space Patrol team, and while chasing down a space pirate, your ship crash lands in a house in the Japanese countryside. The characters are all really cute, and it's funny to see how they react to ordinary things in the house as being weird and alien. And after playing it for a little while, the core platforming and atmosphere kinda reminded me of Toy Story 2 for the PS1. Although, unfortunately, it's not as easy to play. For one thing, the camera isn't very good and you can't control it at all with the right stick. Instead, you have to stop in place, push the R1 button to go into first person mode, and then look around with the left stick. And on top of that, you have very limited control in the air, so it can make precision jumping feel much more difficult than it needs to be. I've spent more time than I'd like to admit just tiptoeing through the first area because of this. The areas around the house are also very wide open and don't have a lot of objects for you to jump around on, so it kind of felt flat and empty at times. Although there are these little dash panels you can walk on to speed up traversal, but I feel like these wouldn't have been necessary if they just adjusted the scale a little bit or designed the levels better. One of the main things you'll have to do in this game is rescue your teammates, and they send out SOS signals throughout the house, which you have to follow using photographs as clues. After you rescue a teammate, they'll give you a new ability to use, and some of them are actually pretty cool. Although I do think it's kinda weird that some of them are not unlocked right from the start, like the basic melee attack. It's pretty weird. Another strange feature is the time loop mechanic, where the in-game time has a limit of 1 hour, at which point you'll be sent back to your ship and the timer will reset. Thankfully though, you can use a hamster to fast travel throughout the house, so I never felt like this was much of an issue, but I still feel like it was an unnecessary addition to the game. Overall though, I think it's a pretty interesting little game, but it is very text heavy, and some of the dialogue was way too fast for me to be able to read, so it's difficult for me to recommend importing it. I'm gonna give this game
3.5 stars.
The next game we're going to be taking a look at is Gregory Horror Show Soul Collector. This game is actually based on a Japanese animated series of the same name. It's a comedy horror game where you play as a blocky dude who is trapped in a spooky hotel for the night, and while sleeping, the Swedish Grim Reaper confronts you and offers to help you escape in exchange for the lost souls of the hotel's guests. Sure, it's an interesting concept, and I have to say, I was pretty impressed with the game's art style. Being based on a series, you can already tell it has a really strong sense of identity and a well-designed art direction. Everything looks very crisp, and the cartoony visuals give it a certain level of charm that I'd say holds up pretty well, even compared to some of today's games. Also, I forgot to mention, Gregory is the name of this little mouse guy, who's the manager of the hotel. And despite its cutesy aesthetic, you get the impression that there's definitely some dark stuff going on behind the scenes. The game features a day-night cycle where every NPC has their own schedule, and your goal is to sneak around the hotel and steal souls from the unsuspecting guests. Each soul needs to be collected in a specific way, which means you'll either have to spy on them or talk to the other characters to gather information. And after successfully collecting a lost soul, the guests will get mad at you and seek revenge, which means you'll have to run away and hide from them if they ever spot you. And if they do catch you, you'll have to watch a spooky cutscene.
Time for a blood test. Oh, that felt so good.
The controls also feel pretty good, and one thing I liked is that whenever you complete a task and need to go speak to a certain character, the game will just teleport you there so you don't have to waste time backtracking. I thought it was a neat little touch, and overall, the game feels really polished. It's pretty fun, and the game was also released in Korea and the PAL region, so this is definitely an import-friendly game. They also made a gacha game for mobile devices in 2018 and are apparently crowdfunding a new game, so who knows, maybe you'll hear more about the series in the future. 4 stars. The next game we'll be looking at is the sequel to a PS1 game we talked about in the last video, Zoku Segare ijiri, which means continuously playing with yourself. And I have to say, as a sequel, I'm actually impressed. They managed to make it feel like even more of a fever dream than the first game did. Right away, you'll notice that the game is fully 3D now, and it features a lot of fully voiced cutscenes too.
あんたキリンのままだね。あんただってせがれのままでしょ。だって僕は歩けるんだよ。ほら、あんた無理でしょ。何言ってんの？収納に便利なキャスター付きよ。それは便利ですね。これのおかげで散歩も楽々ですよ。
急なお客さんが来てもさっとしまえるからいいです。
バネを内蔵しているので段差のあるところも大丈夫。
Gameplay-wise, it's very similar to the original, only this time you're given missions to make it all feel more cohesive and like an actual video game. The main gimmick revolves around these transformation sequences. Basically, every NPC in this universe has a pet human, and they all have something about their appearance that they don't like and want you to change. Your main way of going about this is to talk to various characters and do the whole sentence-building gameplay loop that we saw in the last game. One thing that's pretty cool about it this time around is that you'll have to guess which character you should talk to and which specific combination of words will likely give you the result that you're looking for, like talking to the elephant to get big ears or the baseball coach to get shredded. There are also enemies roaming around the map, and if you encounter one, you'll be forced to play rock, paper, scissors with them, and if you lose, they'll desecrate you. It's definitely a strange game, but it also feels like they put a lot more effort into improving everything that they had with the first game, and I thought it was pretty neat. The language barrier might get in the way if you can't read Japanese though, as this game does have a lot more dialogue than the PS1 version. But if that doesn't bother you and you're just looking for a crazy Japanese game to play, I think this is it. Oh geez, he's actually dead now, oh my god. Another game we'll be checking out is Simple 2000 Series Volume 88, The Miniskirt Police, which is a beat-em-up released as part of the Simple 2000 series of budget PS2 titles in Japan. You play as a special forces agent who is tracking down a leader of a criminal organization, and the main draw of the game is, as the title suggests, the fact that your character is wearing a miniskirt, and when you take damage, your clothes will get torn up. It's definitely an absurd premise and one you probably couldn't make nowadays, and the combat isn't all that deep either, but it's just ridiculous enough to be kinda fun. You start each level with only your melee attack, but as you progress you can pick up guns and grenades too, and while the controls aren't the best, it gets the job done. However, the camera moves really slowly and it's also inverted like a lot of these early 3D games are, so it can feel a little janky at times. You can also sneak around by crawling, but the game has a really primitive stealth system and the enemies can't hear you, so it really doesn't need to be in the game. I don't know why they did this. The whole game has that weird early 2000s arcade game vibe to it, and I actually had more fun with it than I was expecting. It's really stupid, but it's the fun kind of stupid, and of course, the whole game is in Japanese, but for a game like this, I'd say you can still enjoy it even without the story, so I'm gonna give this one 3 stars. Next up, we have the Tairyou Jigoku, which means something in Japanese. This one is also a simple 2000 game, and it originally caught my interest while I was researching different games for this video. I mean, look at these screenshots, they're so crazy that this may very well be a hidden gem of a horror game that we've just discovered. If only I had known. The premise of the game is basically Alice in Wonderland if it were a bad Japanese anime. You play as an annoying schoolgirl and you forgot your phone at school, so one night you decide to go look for it and find that a rabbit stole it from you, so you chase him around and he leads you through these portals which take you to the various horror stages of the game. While it's not the best idea, it could work if it weren't for its awful execution. The gameplay is just so bad. Every stage has you running around a maze-like area that's overflowing with swarms of creepy crawlies. The game gives you weapons to fight back with, but there are just way too many enemies for any of them to be useful, and if any of the bugs stick to you at any point, you'll be completely paralyzed and they'll all swarm you. You can shake them off by button mashing, but it's very unresponsive and you'll often just die because of it. It also doesn't help that the main character's voice is really annoying and made my ears bleed every time I took damage. You can sneak past the enemies, but this also takes so much time, so regardless of how you approach it, progressing through the levels is extremely time-consuming and tedious. I did think it was pretty cool that you could whack this giant moth with a baseball bat. That was pretty funny. But overall, I was very disappointed. I had such high hopes from the screenshots that I saw, but man, this was just so horrible. I guess not all simple 2000 games are created equally. Lesson learned. And lastly, we're gonna check out Ski Jumping Pairs Reloaded, which at first glance seems to be a totally normal skiing game, until... Yeah, this game is ridiculous. The whole game is presented like a televised Olympic skiing event with an announcer and everything, but the tricks are just so crazy.
Take off. 寝転がって 1, 2 Welcome to my exercise room!
The core gameplay loop involves you picking your team, selecting what trick you're going to perform, and then doing it by pressing the corresponding buttons on the screen. I do wish the gameplay was more involved in this and gave you direct control over the player like in other extreme sports games, but for what it is, it's fine, I guess. One thing I didn't like though is that in order to land the trick successfully, you have to push the button inputs on both sides of the screen, which can be really hard to focus on if you don't have the trick memorized. I'm guessing this was intended to be played with 2 people holding either side of the controller, but for someone like me who doesn't have any friends, it can get pretty bad. It also doesn't help that the game will sporadically just drop your inputs, which almost always results in you failing and crashing. And that's pretty much the whole game. It's pretty basic, and it can start to feel very repetitive after about 20 or 30 minutes. Some of the tricks are really hilarious though, and so it can even be fun to just watch all the AI players do their tricks after you, but even that gets old after you've seen them all. You can unlock more tricks to do by purchasing them in the town, but a lot of them are really expensive, and so you're gonna have to grind quite a bit to unlock all of them. That said though, it's definitely good for a laugh, and if you're the type of person who enjoys watching bad movies with your friends, this one might be worth checking out. 3 stars. And that concludes our deep dive into these unusual PS2 games from Japan. I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised by some of them, and some were disappointing, but that's the exciting part about checking out all of these bizarre games. You don't really know what you're gonna get. And the good thing about the PS2 library is it's just so massive. There were actually quite a few games that didn't make it into this video, so if you'd like to see more Japan-exclusive PS2 games, let me know down in the comments. And don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to my channel for more content. And with that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one.
Up, down, ooh, do, oh, ooh.